Alright, so we're back again here today with another video. As the title suggests, I'm going to be going over 5 fragrances from French Avenue. I would say 4 of these are pretty new. The 5th one has been out for a little while now, but I just recently picked it up. And so I'm just going to be giving my just initial thoughts on these fragrances. So this is not like a full review or anything like that. Won't really be getting too detailed with this video, but just kind of wanted to give my initial thoughts on these fragrances. All right, so the first one is Chaos Extrait. So this, from what I've seen, is supposed to be like an interpretation of, I believe it's called Kirsch Headspace or Headspace Kirsch Baie. I think the company is called Headspace. So we have this one. And then the second one is another one of the Zenith, line fragrances from French Avenue. So this one is Zenith Blue. So this one is supposed to be kind of like a take on Dior Sauvage. The next one that I have here is a part of that Vulcan line. So this one is the Vulcan Baie. So this is supposed to be another Stefan Humbert Lucas fragrance. Supposed to be, I believe, Stefan Humbert Lucas Pink Boa. All right, so we've got that one. The next one is called Firestorm. So this one is supposed to be Penhaligon's, I believe it's called The Word by Arthur or something like that. I'll have the name of the fragrance on the screen here. But it is a Penhaligon's fragrance, basically, that this is inspired by. And then the last one is Elysian. So Elysian, this one, at least from what I've seen on Fragrantica, is supposed to be like an interpretation of Narcotic Delight from Initio. All right. So those are the 5 fragrances that I'll be kind of giving my sort of initial thoughts on. I'm going to start off with the Chaos Extrait. All right. So obviously you have this Chaos Extrait fragrance. You've got Aether Extrait that comes in the same bottle, just like a green color. And then I've seen another one called Atlantis, which comes in like a blue bottle. And that one is supposed to be like an interpretation of Wave Child, I believe. So this fragrance, the original, the Kirsch Headspace, it's basically, to me, it's like a very like boozy, leathery, slightly smoky, sort of cherry fragrance. Is basically, it's the best way for me to kind of describe it. Now, I will say that there are definitely some differences between this and the original fragrance. This to me does not smell as close to the original as what like Aether Extrait did to Parfums de Marly's Greenly. There's definitely, I would say, like a twist on, this and the original, or this compared to the original. So the main differences that I'm noticing so far anyway, and I mean, I've only had this for like a week or so now, is the Chaos Extrait, when compared to the Kirsch Headspace, this definitely seems a little bit sweeter. It seems a little bit kind of smokier, and it's using like a different sort of boozy note. So in the Kirsch Headspace, that one is using like sake, which, I mean, I don't really drink that much anymore, but I used to drink. And if you're someone who's familiar with different types of, alcohol, you definitely, that certain types of alcohol have certain types of smells. So, tequila is going to smell different from vodka. Sake is going to smell different from, tequila. Rum is going to smell different from cognac, like that sort of thing. And so really what I'm getting from this is more of sort of like a sweet sort of rum, type of note from the Chaos Extrait, as opposed to that more sort of like, I would say, kind of lighter smelling, sake note that you get in the original fragrance. Now, I do kind of slightly prefer, I think, the original Kirsch Headspace just a little bit more than this fragrance. And it's actually for reasons that typically I wouldn't really like. So the Headspace fragrance, that to me, the leather is definitely, it's dialed up more in the Headspace fragrance. And it definitely smells a little bit more, you know, realistic than what it does in the Chaos Extrait. Also, in my opinion, the Headspace fragrance is not as, you know, smoky as what, you know, Chaos Extrait is. It's not as, you know, kind of like sweet as what this is. Like the cherry in this, definitely, it doesn't come off as sort of natural smelling as what it does in the original. It comes across as like a little bit more of like a sweeter, more kind of artificial smelling type of cherry. And like I said, you can tell that they're using a different type of, you know, boozy note in this fragrance. The leather is definitely toned down in this, but I think, you know, again, like that sort of smoky incense is definitely dialed up in the Chaos Extrait. Now, I don't necessarily feel like that makes this fragrance like a bad fragrance or a bad interpretation. This, again, to me, it just smells a little bit more like a twist on, you know, Headspace or Kirsch Headspace, more than anything. Like, you know, to me, it kind of seems like they deliberately made this a little bit different from, you know, the original fragrance. Either that, or maybe I guess they just couldn't source the same materials, so this was like the best that they could do with what they had, you know, at the price point that they're selling this at. But yeah, man, I mean, I do like both fragrances actually a lot. You know, again, I like the Headspace fragrance despite it having like a more sort of leathery feel to it. If you all have watched this channel for, you know, any amount of time, you know, I'm not really like the biggest fan of like leather notes and scents. So, I mean, just the way that it's done in the Headspace fragrance, I actually do really like it. And I do like that, you know, sort of sake, sort of boozy note that you get from the original. All right. So far, this is still definitely a fragrance that I think that I would recommend, you know, especially at the price point. I believe this was like, I don't know, $40 to $45 or so is what I paid for this. So this is 100 ml. I think 100 ml of the Headspace fragrance it was something over $200. I think it might have been like around $250 to $270, something like that. And then I think the main size that I saw available for the original was like a 30 ml bottle, and that I think goes for like 110. So I think, you know, if you have like a really, really large collection and you know that you'll probably never go through a 100 ml bottle, then the 30 ml does definitely still make sense, I think, you know, at that price point. And it's, especially if it's not a fragrance that you intend to wear every day. Because I don't necessarily think that this is like a everyday type of, you know, signature scent worthy type of scent. But, you know, it is still a very nice, in my opinion, fall and winter time type of scent, you know, especially if you like, you know, leathery, boozy, kind of cherry type of, you know, fragrances, then this is definitely the type of scent profile that you'll like. I do think it is pretty unisex as well. So it does, you know, definitely have some versatility there. And I do think that it could be worn day or night. All right. So that's so far my first impressions on Chaos. I'm not going to talk about performance or anything like that. I'll go over that in the, you know, full review. But so far, I am definitely happy with Chaos Extrait. All right, so the next one on the list, this one is Zenith Blue. So Zenith Blue, like I mentioned, this is basically, it's like Dior Sauvage. And this one is, I would say it's okay. Like, to me, this isn't necessarily like, it's not the worst interpretation of Sauvage, but it's not the best. I definitely think that the Banneter version is absolutely the best Sauvage interpretation that I've smelled so far. This to me also, it sort of has like a slight sort of twist on it as well. I don't think necessarily like, especially if you're someone who hasn't smelled Sauvage in like a really long time, I don't think that you'll really pick up on it. But I think if you're like a regular wearer of Sauvage and then you pick this up and wear it, you will kind of notice some slight differences between this and Sauvage. And I think the biggest difference really that I noticed between this and Sauvage is instead of me getting like the sort of ambroxan sort of feel that I get from, Dior Sauvage, I get more of sort of like a dry sort of vetiver smell from this fragrance. And that's why I say this is kind of more so like a twist. To me, I get more of sort of like a dry vetiver type of base than what I get with Sauvage. I do think that this is, so far based on what I'm smelling, I think it's kind of, you could maybe say like a combination of like the EDT and the EDP. Like, I don't necessarily think that it's just the EDT or just the EDP. I think it's kind of like a combination of those two, to be honest with you. And like I said, I definitely, the way that this wears on my skin, it definitely gives off more of sort of like a fresh, clean, sort of dry vetiver type of vibe off of my skin anyway. So again, it's not bad at all. I definitely think that, this is a super easy to wear fragrance. The one time that I did wear this fragrance so far, since getting this fragrance, I wore it to the gym, and it performed like you would expect Sauvage to perform. It definitely had pretty decent projection the whole time. It kept me smelling fresh. It definitely reminded me of wearing, Dior Sauvage. So the vibe was definitely there with this fragrance. But like I said, I do think if you're someone who is looking for like something that's really, really close, especially to like the EDT version of Sauvage, then I would definitely more so kind of lean towards the Banneter version. I can't remember the number, for that particular fragrance. But definitely I would say Banneter's version of Sauvage, I think, is definitely a little bit superior, to this. And they're around the same price pretty much. So, I would definitely recommend that one. But if you're maybe somewhere where you can't access Banneter fragrances, and you are able to get your hands on French Avenue fragrances, then I do still think that this is a solid interpretation of Dior Sauvage. Definitely better than like, I think the last like Dior Sauvage clone that I really owned was the Armaf one. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one that it's got like the really big, funny looking bottle, and it's like black and silver. I can't think of the name of that fragrance, but that was like the last Sauvage interpretation that I had. I've owned Sauvage like on and off over the years for sure. And it's not necessarily a scent profile that I like reach for a lot now, especially with all of the other sort of freshy scents that I have in my collection. But, again, for like a really easy to wear, maybe gym scent, errand scent or something like that, when you just run into the store, you want to throw on something real quick, it's going to keep you fresh, then, I think that this is pretty good. So, again, I would say definitely check this one out. If you're looking for, I would say, a pretty decent quality, interpretation of the scent. Like I said, it does kind of seem like it's more of sort of like a twist slash hybrid of, like the EDT and the EDP. But again, it is still solid, man. So check out Zenith Blue from French Avenue. All right, next one is Vulcan Baie. All right, so Vulcan Baie. This fragrance, I've never smelled, or I'd never smelled the original Stefan Humbert Lucas Pink Boa. Looking at the notes, the note breakdown definitely seemed more kind of like on the feminine side for me, and it definitely to me made sense that they would put it in a bottle like this, that's pink like this, and that they would name it Vulcan Baie. This fragrance to me, it kind of gives me like the vibe of like a Victoria's Secret body spray. Like that's really the best way for me to kind of describe this. It is definitely very fruity. And like the fruits that you get from this are, I would say, mainly from like berries. So like a lot of strawberry, blackberry. You're getting a lot of black currant from this as well. And it does definitely kind of give you like a pink lemonade type of vibe. I would say like kind of like an alcoholic pink lemonade sort of vibe is what I get from this. But like I said, it to me, the way that, especially the way that it wears, because it definitely is not, it doesn't project that well off of my skin, and it really doesn't last that long either. This, like I said, it definitely, it wears and kind of smells more like a Victoria's Secret body spray, in my opinion. Definitely leans pretty feminine to me. I think maybe if you're somebody who, if you're someone who wears the Lattafa, it's a part of that Badi Al Oud line. I can't remember the exact name of the fragrance. It's the one that's supposed to be like the interpretation of the Kayali, juicy apple, whatnot. If you're a fan of that fragrance and you wear that fragrance regularly, then I think you probably won't have an issue with wearing something like this Vulcan Baie. But I mean, at least for me anyway, I felt like that fragrance was definitely feminine. And to me, this smell is even more feminine than what that fragrance did. Just my opinion. Again, if you like that fragrance, hey, fine. Keep wearing it, maybe even give this one a try. But, at least for me anyway, this does definitely smell like more of like a feminine type of scent. Like this is not something that I would personally wear at all. I can still appreciate the scent though. Like, again, it does smell very kind of like refreshing, very fruity, has, again, a slightly sort of like boozy alcoholic type of smell to it, in my opinion, which I do like. But it just, I don't know, to me, it comes across as a little bit too feminine, from my taste anyway. And I'm someone who really, really loves unisex style, scents. And I'll even wear scents that, maybe even have a slight sort of feminine lean to them, or are technically marketed towards women, if I actually like the scent. But at least for me, this one is just, it's a little bit too far to the feminine side for me. Like I mentioned, this didn't really perform that well on me, in terms of like, especially in terms of the projection. I felt like I could smell this okay for like maybe like the first hour to hour and a half or so. And then after that, I mean, it was basically like a skin scent on me for like the next several hours or whatnot. And then, I mean, it kind of disappeared off of my skin. So I'll have to give it a few more wearings, I guess, to, really kind of give it a chance. Also, I'll try to let this one, maturate a little bit, because I remembered how the God of Fire interpretation in this bottle style, how that one was. I remember that one definitely was a lot more different, you know, from when I had first sprayed it to like maybe like a month or so afterwards. So, you know, the scent on this could definitely change with maturation. I've seen it happen with, you know, another fragrance again in this same line. So I'm willing to do that. But I think so far, you know, based on what I'm getting from this scent profile in general, it just isn't for me. All right. So this one again, man, is Vulcan Baie from French Avenue. All right. So the next one is Firestorm. All right. So this one again, I cannot remember the exact name of the original from Penhaligon's. I know it starts with like the word as known by Arthur or something like that. I can't remember the exact name of it, but basically the original Penhaligon scent, if I were to describe it, I would say it's like the most highest quality, most smoothest, most sexiest sort of take on like that Dior Homme Intense, you know, type of scent profile. This fragrance, I would say it does definitely, it comes closer to the original scent, like especially in the far dry down. When you first spray this on though, this to me smells like almost like a completely different scent. So like the original scent, you get like this really, really smooth, buttery iris, you know, same type of iris that you get from something like Dior Homme Intense. You get that, and then you get like a very smooth sort of vanilla. And I would say just enough, you know, incense or smokiness. Like it's not like overly smoky, it's not like overly heavy or anything like that in the original. Whereas with Firestorm, with this one, I'm mainly in the opening get like some sort of red fruit. So maybe like a red apple or something like that is what I get with this fragrance. I get a lot of that. I would say I get more sort of like a smoky, like a heavier, smokier incense from this fragrance from Firestorm. And the iris is definitely there, but it's not, to me, it's not exactly the same as what it is in the original Penhaligons. Now, what I will say is this is considerably stronger than what the Penhaligons fragrance is, just in terms of like its push and its projection. But I feel like the way that the Penhaligon smells, like that is like one of the smoothest fragrances that I've smelled. And I don't really think that it needs to be super beast mode, because at least on my skin anyway, the Penhaligon's fragrance, that one, even though it didn't really like project super beast mode, it really stuck on my skin and lasted well over 8 hours. So that's one thing that I was really happy about with that fragrance, was that, yeah, even though it definitely sat a lot closer to my skin than what Firestorm did, it still lasted on me, and it was still a fragrance that I could still smell. This one I think is, I guess you could say maybe overly strong for what it needs to be. I won't say that it's overly strong to the point where it's like cloying or anything like that. I think they just kind of unnecessarily maybe made this overly strong. And as a result, it doesn't come across as nice as what the Penhaligons does. Now, again, as the fragrance starts to dry down, and I'm talking about hours into the fragrance, so probably I would say at least about 3 or 4 hours into the fragrance, the dry down between Firestorm and the Penhaligons, to me, definitely comes a lot closer for sure. But yeah, this compared to the Penhaligons, when you first spray it on, you could definitely tell that this is definitely the harsher, lower quality, and in my opinion, you know, not as good smelling fragrance, you know, compared to the original. So, you know, maybe that may change over time with some maturation with this one. I will still say though, just as like if you're gonna judge this fragrance on its own, this is still a very good fragrance. So I don't want to have anyone thinking that, you know, I think that this is a bad fragrance or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think if you're going to compare this to what it's supposed to be inspired by, I don't think that this is necessarily a great interpretation. But, you know, just on its own, again, I do think that this is a very nice scent. So I think if this was like a original scent from, you know, French Avenue, then, you know, my thoughts on this would be like totally different. But, you know, again, it's the fact that this is supposed to be interpreting another, you know, fragrance. And I don't necessarily think that it does it that well. All right. So that, again, is my take on Firestorm, or my initial thoughts. And then the last one is Elysian. All right. So the only reason why I picked this one up is because I saw, at least on Fragrantica, that this was supposed to be like a narcotic delight interpretation. And so, you know, I already had the Nudo Exotic Flowers. As you all know, I really hate this bottle. So I was hoping that, you know, I could get higher quality, more accurate juice in, you know, I would say a much better looking bottle. I mean, this is still kind of like, it's kind of tacky to me, but it's definitely way better looking than this for sure on my shelf. All right. So I went ahead and picked this up, and I can actually say that the Nudo Exotic Flowers is, to me, is closer to Narcotic Delight than what this is. This, to me, it smells more like I don't know, it smells kind of like a completely different scent. So, you know, I don't know if maybe if people just put that on Fragrantica that it's supposed to be, you know, interpretation of Narcotic Delight. Maybe some people kind of see some similarities between the two scents. This, to me, smells like a totally different scent. So it starts off very kind of like boozy. You could say kind of floral, but I don't know. I'm kind of getting like what smells to me like saffron in this fragrance. And it's a very prominent sort of saffron note. Almost kind of comes across kind of leathery. And like I said, when I smell this side by side to the Narcotic Delight, and then I smell this side by side to Narcotic Delight, this smells way closer to Narcotic Delight than what this does. Like I said, this definitely to me kind of smells like a completely different fragrance. You know, if anyone knows what this is actually inspired by, definitely let me know in the comments. Whatever it is, I haven't smelled it, but I don't think that this is really supposed to be like a Narcotic Delight interpretation, because I'm just not getting hardly any sort of similarities between this and Narcotic Delight at all. You know, at least with the Nudo Exotic Flowers, you get that same type of vibe. I just think that the cherry and the florals are not as high quality, but it's still giving you the same sort of like scent profile for the most part. Whereas I think Elysian to me just smells like something totally different. Now, I think as a scent on its own, Elysian is definitely, it's a decent scent. It does, to me, kind of come across as being a little bit more sort of like on the mature side for sure. And it smells more like more of a formal type of scent, I would say, for sure. So, I mean, this is definitely not something that, you know, I would like wear casually or anything like that. This would definitely be kind of like you're going to an event or something like that where you're dressing up. I do think that this is definitely kind of unisex, slightly kind of masculine leaning for sure. But yeah, I mean, to say that this is anything like, narcotic delight. Yeah, no, this is not, to me anyway. It doesn't smell anything like narcotic delight. Now the performance on it is, so far pretty decent. It does project pretty well off my skin, um, and it did, last a pretty long time as well. But again, this is just not. It's not really like a casual scent. And I mean, I guess maybe for some people could probably say that narcotic delight isn't necessarily like the most casual scent either. But to me, this smells just a little bit more kind of like formal smelling, in my opinion, than what something like even, narcotic delight does. So, like I said, this definitely, to me, it kind of comes across, I would say, boozy, slightly floral, definitely heavy on saffron. So, it does have like a slightly kind of leathery type of feel to it. And, I guess you could also say sort of like ambery a little bit. It's definitely a more kind of sophisticated, more mature type of scent. All right. Would I still recommend this just as a scent by itself? Yes, I would. But if we're talking about like as a interpretation of narcotic delight, absolutely not. All right. So that is my take on Elysian. And that's my take on all 5 fragrances. Definitely let me know in the comments what you all think about these 5 fragrances, if you all have actually smelled them. Let me know if you love these fragrances. Do you hate them? Are they just okay? Definitely let me know in the comments. Also, I have links in the description to where you can purchase all of these fragrances. And if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see you on the next video.